I should have been angry the moment I realized how invisible I am to my own family, but instead, I just felt numb. Last summer, I spent $7,500, every penny carefully allocated for flights, hotel rooms, dinners, and activities. To give my family a vacation I hoped would bring us closer. Instead, they spent those 2 weeks nitpicking everything. The food was bland, the schedule was too tight, the beach wasn't sandy enough. Not a single thank you came my way. More than once I caught my mother, Linda, whispering criticisms about how I raised my kids right in front of me while she babysat. I smiled through it then, because that's what I do. I keep the peace. I hold the line. But inside, I was breaking. I'm Ashley Ford, 42, a senior project manager at a nonprofit. I'm the responsible one in my family, the financial backbone, the emotional anchor, the one who plans the holidays, settles disputes, and covers the costs no one else can or will. I've become the family's invisible backbone, but in the process, I'm also the scapegoat, the target of silent disregard, and sometimes overt cruelty. My father, Mark Cook, watches all this unfold without ever stepping in. He's the passive enabler, the man who values a quiet home over my dignity. He sees the tension, but he prefers denial, letting my mother's narcissism run wild unchecked. I keep a secret, something no one else knows about. I meticulously record every cent spent, every hurtful word, every slight. It's my way of holding on to some control in a family where my kindness is weaponized against me. I'm weary, but I'm not broken. Not yet. I remember a night when I was 16, sitting in the dimly lit living room, watching my parents throw a party for Rachel, my younger sister. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses, but the glow never reached me. Rachel, the golden child, was showered with gifts and attention. Her smile was radiant, her every whim indulged. I, on the other hand, had received a modest book from my mother and a dismissive pat on the back. "Stop being so dramatic," Linda had snapped when I dared to complain about the unfairness. That moment marked everything. It wasn't just a birthday party, it was the blueprint for my role in the family. Rachel was the favored one, the untouchable, the perfect daughter. I was the invisible one, ignored, blamed for any trouble, and told to tolerate it as just how families are. I tried to believe it, telling myself that being responsible meant bearing the burden quietly. Rachel's mistakes were overlooked with a smile, while my tiniest missteps were magnified into crises. Over the years, that favoritism became a wedge, pushing me into the scapegoat role I reluctantly accepted. Now, looking back, the anger bubbles beneath the surface, sharp and raw. That teenage girl learned early that love in this family came with conditions, and I was never the chosen one. Over the past 5 years, my sacrifices have piled up like unspoken debts. I've contributed over $50,000 to family events, helping pay Rachel's college tuition, covering repairs on my parents' aging home, and footing the bill for our annual family vacations. I've missed my own birthday parties, opting instead to coordinate Rachel's wedding plans down to the last detail. Every time, my efforts were met with a collective shrug or a dismissive, "That's just what family does." Even my in-laws have echoed that sentiment, making me feel as though my generosity is not exceptional but expected. Yet, no one acknowledges the toll it takes on me. Michael, my husband, is the one who sees it all clearly. He's the steady voice reminding me that fairness matters and urging me to set boundaries. He's my quiet ally in the storm, questioning why I keep giving when I receive so little in return. I've come to rely on my secret power, a detailed ledger of expenses, texts, emails, every contribution and every slight carefully documented. These records are like a shield, a way to prove to myself that I am not imagining the imbalance, that my efforts are real and substantial. The truth, however, is harder to face. The more I give, the less I seem to matter. One afternoon at a family barbecue, the thin veil of civility finally tore. I was setting plates on the picnic table when I overheard my mother, Linda, leaning close to my father and Rachel, her voice low but venomous. "Ashley is never good enough," she said. her eyes sharp as she glanced toward me. "She's a disappointment. Her kids are at risk because of her selfishness and incompetence." The words sliced through me like ice. Several relatives froze, exchanging uncomfortable glances, but no one spoke up. Mark looked away, avoiding my gaze, as if pretending he hadn't heard would erase the cruelty. Later, I confronted Linda quietly, my voice steady despite the hurt. She smirked, twisting my words, accusing me of hearing things wrong and being too sensitive. I wanted to explode, to shout the years of pain and neglect back at her, but I swallowed it. Instead, I forced a smile and walked away, brushing off the sting. Yet, as I stood there, the seed of doubt took root deep inside me. Was I really the failure they claimed? Or was I finally seeing the truth about the family I'd tried so hard to hold together? For the first time, the cracks in my carefully maintained facade began to show. After that barbecue, I thought maybe a line had been crossed. Maybe Mark or Linda would ease up, reconsider how they treated me. But instead, the tension only thickened, turning into something more calculated. Mark began his subtle counterattack, cloaked in fatherly concern. At family gatherings, I caught him leaning in to whisper half-truths to distant cousins and old family friends. How I was overreacting, how my complaints were dramatic and ungrateful. It was as if he was quietly rewriting the story, painting me as the troublemaker. I overheard a neighbor, someone I barely knew, question my reliability, asking if I was really as generous as I claimed. The stares and side eyes multiplied. Linda, sensing her chance, grew even colder and sharper, her words laced with poison but masked behind a veneer of concern. Mark never spoke up. His silence was a shield for her cruelty. My phone buzzed constantly with passive-aggressive messages from family friends, cryptic texts like, "Family is complicated, huh?" Or, "Sometimes it's better to let things go." I felt like I was under siege, surrounded by flying monkeys who believed Mark's twisted narrative. When I confronted them, trying to explain my side, I was met with dismissive shrugs or direct accusations of disrupting family harmony. Mark and Linda teamed up effortlessly, turning my valid frustrations into selfish complaints. The hardest was watching Mark look at me with quiet disappointment instead of support, as if I was the daughter who refused to keep peace. I tried to stand my ground, to push back against the gaslighting, but every attempt felt like hitting a brick wall. My words twisted back on me, my intentions questioned, my very character undermined. I was drowning, and the family I once thought I could count on was now a battleground where I fought alone, my voice shrinking with every attack. Michael saw it too, how the family's subtle war was breaking me down. He urged me to keep my head high, to not let their poison seep in, but the isolation was suffocating. I could feel my heart tighten during every gathering, the way conversations stalled when I entered the room, the way eyes slid away from mine. The family I had bankrolled, emotionally and financially, was turning its back. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was the erasure of my presence, my worth, my dignity. And the cruelest part was the complicity, Mark's silent consent that gave Linda free rein. I was no longer just the scapegoat. I was the villain in their carefully crafted story. I wanted to scream, to demand justice, but instead, I swallowed the pain, steeling myself for what was to come. I realized that fighting fire with fire wouldn't work here. I needed a different approach, a way to confront this poison without losing myself entirely. So, with Michael's steady encouragement, I decided to try something different, a family meeting. I gathered my records, the receipts, the texts, the carefully documented moments that showed the imbalance, the favoritism, the neglect. I wanted to be clear, calm, and factual. I invited Mark and Linda to sit down, hoping for a moment of honesty, a chance to heal. I laid everything out, the money I spent, the emotional toll, the ways I felt sidelined and disrespected. I looked at Mark, searching for a flicker of acknowledgement, but his eyes flitted away, unsteady and evasive. Linda sneered, calling my evidence twisted and petty, mocking my attempt to make sense of the chaos. Their reactions cut deeper than any insult. The cousin who mediated, a family friend who had long stood with Linda, subtly turned the meeting against me with loaded questions and thinly veiled smirks. The room grew cold with silence and tension. Mark offered no comfort, no defense. Linda's smirk widened, convinced she'd won. I realized then that my voice was still powerless here, that their denial was a fortress I couldn't breach with logic or facts. The meeting ended with a hollow promise to think about it, but I knew better. I left feeling smaller, more invisible than ever. The hope I had clung to, that maybe peace was possible, crumbled. It was clear peaceful confrontation only gave them more room to dismiss me, to gaslight me further. My heart ached with the weight of betrayal, and yet, beneath the hurt, a fierce resolve began to build. If fairness and recognition were impossible in quiet talks, maybe I'd have to find another way to be heard. When Rachel's baby shower was announced, I thought maybe this time I could bridge the gap. I decided to cover the entire catering bill, $3,500, hoping that generosity might soften the edges, that kindness might cut through the bitterness. I wanted to contribute joyfully, to celebrate my sister's new chapter, but the event quickly turned into another battlefield. As guests arrived, Rachel took center stage, barely acknowledging my presence. When she gave her thank you speeches, she praised our parents for making everything perfect. Not a word for me. It was a slap I didn't expect in front of so many relatives and friends. Linda, ever the director of drama, loudly complained about me trying to steal the spotlight, accusing me of wanting all the attention. She said it loud enough for the room to hear, and for whispers to spread like wildfire. Worse still was the insinuation about Michael, that he was controlling me, manipulating me into bending over backward for a family that didn't care. Several relatives nodded, some casting pitying looks, others smirking as if to say, "We all knew it." I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation, the room tilting into a surreal nightmare. My financial gift, something I had hoped would be a gesture of peace, was erased, forgotten, and twisted into evidence of my selfishness. The whisper campaigns and sidelong glances turned my generosity into gossip. I could feel the social and emotional isolation deepen, like a stain I couldn't wash away. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my standing, my character, my very identity crumbling in front of people I once considered family. That night, driving home with Michael, I felt the weight of every insult, every erased effort pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to demand justice, but exhaustion anchored me instead. The family I loved had made it clear I was not welcome in their spotlight, and yet, I still hoped, for some reason, that maybe, just maybe, Mark could see the cruelty and stop it. I reached out to him privately, in a quiet moment when no one else was watching. I laid it all bare, the pain, the favoritism, the loneliness. I told him what I needed. Simple things like respect, recognition, a break from the endless cycle of blame. I begged him to intervene, to be the father I'd always needed. But his response shattered the fragile hope I held. Mark, with his usual calm that masked so much, told me to choose my battles carefully, warning that pushing too hard would only bring more harm. He spoke of family tradition and keeping peace, phrases that felt like shackles tightening around my throat. There was no promise, no defense, no solidarity, just a cold, quiet refusal to stand by me. I realized then that he wasn't the protector I'd imagined. He was part of the problem, complicit in the silence that allowed Linda's cruelty to flourish. In that moment, I felt utterly abandoned, a daughter invisible not just to the world, but to the one man who should have been my shield. The line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. I was left with the bitter taste of rejection, and the burning knowledge that the family I'd fought so hard for had chosen to let me fall alone. After the family meeting, the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. The cold dismissals and Linda's sneering laughter echoed in my mind, but what stung most was the invisible wall that suddenly grew between me and those I thought might stand by me. Rumors started swirling, Linda's whispers painting me as difficult and bitter, a woman who made mountains out of molehills. It wasn't just the family's usual favoritism anymore. It was an active campaign to isolate me. I noticed it in the way some relatives who once smiled at me now barely met my gaze. their conversations halting when I entered the room. Even a few people I once considered allies began keeping their distance, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. Michael bore the brunt of this too. His own family, usually supportive, urged him to stay out of Ford family drama. The pressure mounted on him silently, a quiet tug-of-war between loyalty to me and the desire to avoid chaos. I saw the strain on his face, the tight jaw, the restless pacing at night, and I hated that my pain was spilling over onto him. There were moments when I caught myself wondering if I was the problem. Was I truly as difficult as they said? Had my constant efforts to hold this fractured family together only made things worse? The questions gnawed at me, twisting my confidence into doubt. Yet, I had the receipts, the texts, the painstaking records etched in my notebooks and phone logs. Every dollar I'd spent, every slight endured, every manipulated conversation replayed in my memory with painful clarity. Still, the absence of support was like a suffocating weight. My voice, once hopeful and persistent, felt smaller and more fragile with each attempt to be heard. I had always been the one to hold the family's fragile threads, but now those threads were slipping away, unraveling faster than I could grasp. I felt trapped in a cage of my own making, exhausted, invisible, and alone. The house, once a place of refuge, became a battleground where smiles masked contempt, and every gathering was a test of endurance. My heart ached with the realization that the family who depended on me financially and emotionally was now turning its back. The loneliness settled deep into my bones. I wanted to scream, but instead, I curled inward, holding the jagged pieces of my dignity as close as I could. Then came the vacation, the latest in a long line of trips I'd funded almost entirely myself, a $7,500 expense that I hoped would be a balm for the frayed relationships. We arrived at the rented lake house, the air thick with forced smiles and polite conversations. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, I stayed in their room, the soft hum of the baby monitor filling the silence. I thought I was safe, that the walls would protect the fragile peace I longed for. But then I heard it, Linda's voice, low and venomous, drifting through the monitor's speakers. "Your mother was never good enough," she spat, her words sharp as knives. "I'm surprised she hasn't ruined you yet." The room felt like it closed in around me, the soft breathing of my children in the next room a cruel contrast to the venom in Linda's words. My chest tightened, breath caught in my throat. It was more than hurt. It was betrayal so deep it felt like a physical blow. Mark was there, standing silently beside her, his eyes avoiding mine even as the poison spilled freely into the quiet night. He said nothing, offering no shield, no defense. That silence was a betrayal in itself, a tacit permission for the cruelty. Without thinking, I reached for my phone and began recording, capturing every word, every hateful inflection. My hands trembled, fury and pain colliding in a storm I could barely control. The betrayal wasn't just in Linda's words. It was in Mark's passive complicity. For so long, I'd hoped he'd be the anchor, the one to stand up and protect me. Instead, he let the tide sweep me away. The recording became my lifeline, a shard of truth I could grasp onto when all else felt like a lie. That night, something inside me shattered. The exhaustion, the doubt, the isolation, they all converged into a cold, fierce clarity. I would no longer be silent. I would no longer endure. In the quiet hours after everyone had gone to bed, I listened to the recording over and over, the words burning into my mind like a brand, pain twisted into anger, a slow, simmering blaze that grew hotter with each replay. I thought back over the years, the countless dinners I'd paid for, the repairs I'd covered, the emotional labor I'd carried, every insult from Linda, every dismissive glance from Mark, every time Rachel had been lifted up while I was pushed aside. This wasn't random cruelty or a family quirk. It was a deliberate pattern of abuse, a well-oiled machine designed to break me down and erase me. I cataloged every slight, every debt unpaid, every moment I was blamed for things beyond my control. The years of sacrifice suddenly felt like chains I'd been wearing willingly, not out of love, but because I didn't know another way. "Never again," I whispered into the dark. the words a vow to myself. The girl who had always tried to please, who had swallowed pain to keep peace, was gone. In her place stood someone fierce, someone who understood that kindness could be a weapon, and that it was time to turn that weapon around. The anger was no longer aimless. It was a sharpened blade, ready to cut through the lies and the silence. I felt a surge of power in that moment, a new identity forming from the ashes of betrayal. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my life. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a strategist, preparing to fight back. When I finally shared the recording with Michael, his face hardened with resolve. He listened without interruption, his eyes filled with quiet fury and unwavering support. We talked long into the night, mapping out a plan that balanced truth with caution. The upcoming family reunion would be our battleground, a stage where the toxicity that had poisoned my life for decades would be exposed. We discussed who would be there, who might side with me, and how to present the evidence in a way that couldn't be dismissed as overreacting or dramatic. Protecting the children was paramount. Their innocence was a line Michael insisted we would never cross. This was no longer about pleading for recognition. It was about setting boundaries and making sure the truth could no longer be hidden behind lies and silence. Michael's steady voice was a lifeline, reminding me of my worth when I felt invisible, urging me to hold on to my dignity no matter what. His faith in me rekindled a light I thought had flickered out. I felt my heart slow, and a cold, calculated determination took root. This wasn't just a reaction to pain. It was a strategic strike. I was no longer a woman crushed by betrayal. I was a force ready to reclaim what had been stolen. As we planned, the fear that had once paralyzed me began to dissolve, replaced by a fierce hope. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be fallout, rejection, and heartbreak. But it was a path I would walk with my head held high. For the first time in years, I felt ready to take back my story. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the late afternoon blending with the faint clatter of dishes in the sink, and spread out every scrap of paper I'd collected over the years. Bank statements, credit card bills, whispered texts, and those agonizing voicemail recordings. The more I sifted through the numbers, the clearer it became. This family, my family, leaned on me far heavier than I'd ever let myself fully see. Linda owed me at least $20,000 in unpaid loans she never acknowledged. Rachel's expenses weren't just a few forgotten bills. They were massive, charged to my cards without a second thought. Even Mark, always the quiet presence, had his fingers in joint accounts that funneled money through me by default. I realized something that sent a chill down my spine. I was the family's financial anchor, their emotional first responder, and the unspoken keeper of their reputation. Without me, the whole facade would crumble. But it wasn't just money. I documented how often I'd stepped in at the last minute to babysit Rachel's kids, how many crises I'd diffused with calm words and quick decisions, how I'd taken on the emotional labor no one else wanted to touch. They depended on me emotionally, financially, socially, and yet they dismissed me like I was invisible. This imbalance wasn't just unfair. It was unsustainable. I pulled out my phone and scheduled a consultation with a family lawyer I trusted, someone Michael had recommended. I needed a clear understanding of what I could do legally, how to protect my assets before I made any moves, and how to document everything so the law would recognize the abuse I'd endured. The lawyer was thorough and precise, explaining options I hadn't considered, restricting access to joint accounts, formalizing loan agreements, even how recorded conversations could be admissible evidence if handled correctly. I left that meeting feeling a strange mix of power and exhaustion. For the first time, the numbers and words I'd collected weren't just a weight on my chest. They were weapons, tools I could use to reclaim control. The family had underestimated me terribly. I was no longer the powerless scapegoat. I was a quiet powerhouse, and I had the facts to prove it. That night, as the house settled into silence, I organized everything meticulously, labeling folders and files. A fierce clarity settled over me. This was my turning point. Despite the storm brewing inside, I kept my composure. I smiled when Linda shot me those cold, assessing glances at the grocery store. I nodded politely when Rachel launched into her usual complaints about money troubles. I maintained the calm, steady Ashley everyone expected, the dependable sister, the generous daughter, the quiet backbone. But behind that facade, I was finalizing legal consultations, backing up every recording and document to an encrypted drive, and preparing a detailed presentation that would leave no room for denials. The family reunion was my stage, and I planned to lay everything bare. I had even arranged a discreet sound system hidden in the room, ready to play the recordings at just the right moment. Privately, I set up alternative childcare, ensuring Rachel's kids were covered without my involvement for once. I worked with Michael to open new bank accounts in my name alone and reversed unauthorized charges with the help of the lawyer. Every precaution was a shield, every step a strategic move. But outwardly, I was the same woman they'd always known, calm, accommodating, and patient. The tension was palpable beneath the surface. I could feel it in the way Linda's eyes lingered too long on my purse, in the slight hesitation in Mark's voice when he spoke to me. They sensed something was coming, even if they didn't know what. I carried the weight of their underestimation like armor, steady and silent in the eye of the storm. The reunion would change everything, and I was ready. The day of the reunion arrived with a brittle kind of quiet. The house buzzed with forced pleasantries and rehearsed smiles as family trickled in, oblivious to the storm gathering just beneath the surface. I had my notes, my recordings, and my hidden speaker ready, but as I prepared to expose Linda's cutting insults, I stumbled on something far more devastating. While checking my phone for one last detail, I found an email thread between Mark and Linda, a secret correspondence I hadn't known existed, where they plotted how to gaslight me, how to spin stories to the rest of the family, and how to paint me as unstable and selfish. They'd been collaborating for years, a twisted alliance designed to isolate and discredit me. My father wasn't the neutral bystander I thought he was. He was an active participant in the abuse. The emails detailed plans to accuse me of financial improprieties, to spread false rumors about my intentions, and even to manipulate family members into siding against me. A cold wave of betrayal crashed over me, sharper and more painful than any words Linda had ever said. I whispered to Michael, "It was never just my mother." The realization hit me with brutal clarity. I had been fighting a two-front war. This wasn't a family rift. It was a calculated, coordinated attack. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the emails, but underneath the shock, a fierce determination took hold. This revelation didn't break me. It sharpened my focus. I now understood the full scope of the deception, and the urgency to act became undeniable. The battle lines were clearer than ever. I started with the money. It was the most straightforward battleground. Quietly, I withdrew all financial support. I canceled upcoming vacation payments, reversed unauthorized credit card charges Rachel had run up without permission, and blocked family access to joint accounts I controlled. I sent individual messages to each family member affected, framing my actions in terms of self-care and necessary boundaries. "I can't continue to carry this burden alone," I wrote, "and I need to protect my family's financial future." The consequences were immediate and palpable. Rachel's wedding plans stalled, the caterers waiting for deposits that didn't come. Linda's long-overdue home repairs were suddenly on hold. Mark, usually so detached, was forced to face unexpected scrutiny over his finances. They were blindsided, scrambling to adjust, their usual confidence shaken by the sudden loss of their financial safety net. No one connected the dots back to me yet. I watched quietly from the sidelines, measuring their reactions, feeling the power shift subtly but irrevocably. The family's grip on me loosened for the first time in decades. I was reclaiming control not with anger or confrontation, but with calculated, unyielding boundaries. The silence in the aftermath was thick with confusion and frustration. I felt a surge of quiet triumph as I stood firm, finally protecting myself in the only way I knew how. The game had changed. The banquet room buzzed with forced laughter and clinking glasses. A fragile veneer of celebration stretched thin over years of buried resentment. I sat at the head of the table, my hands steady despite the storm swirling inside me. The moment had come. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small Bluetooth speaker I'd hidden earlier, its weight a tangible anchor in my palm. As the chatter swelled, I tapped play on my phone. Linda's voice, sharp and venomous, spilled from the speaker, slicing through the polite din. "Your mother was never good enough. I'm surprised she hasn't ruined you yet." A hush fell instantly. Relatives frozen mid-bite, eyes wide with shock. I watched them, feeling the room tilt as my truth exploded in their midst. The recording ended, but silence lingered like a heavy fog. I rose slowly, eyes steady, and pulled out the printed emails I'd discovered between Mark and Linda. "These," I said, voice calm but unwavering, "are the secret plans you all ignored. Mark's complicity, the gaslighting, the lies. This is the truth you chose to bury." I handed copies to a few close cousins, their faces draining of color as they read. Mark's face went pale. Linda's glare burned holes in me, but she said nothing, caught in the cage of undeniable evidence. The room was thick with disbelief and tension, but I pressed on. No more silence. No more exploitation. My voice echoed off the walls, steady as a drumbeat. "I will no longer carry your burdens alone, nor will I tolerate being invisible." This was my moment, the champagne moment, where the quiet, invisible daughter transformed into the woman who refused to be ignored. The aftermath was immediate and electric. Conversations sparked in hushed clusters, eyes darting from one family member to another, the foundation of years shaking beneath their feet. Calls flooded Mark and Linda's phones, relatives demanding explanations, accusing, questioning. Mark, desperate to contain the chaos, launched into frantic apologies, his voice thick with contrition as he promised change. But I stood firm, unmoved by his sudden tenderness. The patterns that had suffocated me for so long would not resume under the guise of empty words. Rachel, my sister, recoiled as if I'd stabbed her. Her anger flared, venomous and sharp, as she rallied siblings and cousins, desperately trying to isolate me. Yet even in her fury, cracks appeared. Those once loyal to her began whispering doubts, their blind allegiance faltering under the weight of truth. The family's carefully constructed facade fissured, revealing the fractures beneath years of lies and silence. I watched it unravel with a strange mix of sorrow and fierce satisfaction, knowing the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Mark and Linda's desperation morphed into darker, more insidious tactics. Threats of disinheritance surfaced. Whispered warnings circulated in private messages, and attempts to turn distant relatives into flying monkeys intensified. They reached out to Michael and even tried to manipulate my children, weaving their toxic web tighter. But I was no longer their easy target. Anticipating every move, I'd fortified myself with legal counsel and emotional support networks. When Mark's voice came through, dripping with manipulation and false concern, I listened but did not waver. Every veiled threat I documented, every manipulative plea I ignored, building a fortress around my new boundaries. Isolation settled over them, their toxicity repelling more family members by the day. I felt the tension rise but kept my calm, the quiet strength of someone who had endured too much to falter now. My boundaries were unbreachable, a line drawn in the sand that neither threats nor guilt could erase. Now, miles away from that toxic epicenter, I breathe deeply in our new home, the quiet hum of my children's laughter filling spaces once hollow with pain. Michael's hand in mine grounds me as I watch them play, the weight of years lifting slowly from my shoulders, reflecting on the journey, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the moments I thought I'd break. I feel an unexpected peace. I've reclaimed my dignity by naming the truth, by refusing to be invisible any longer. Mark and Linda's hold on the family has diminished. Gatherings happen without their shadow looming, the dynamics shifting toward honesty, even if tentative. My relationship with Rachel remains strained, fractured by years of pain, but it is now honest, no longer layered with unspoken cruelty. I look ahead, not defined by sacrifice but by self-worth, ready to build a life where respect isn't a rare gift but a given. Hope pulses quietly beneath the surface, steady, unwavering, and for the first time in a long time, I feel free.